You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansel. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. Today's guest is Rachel Wolan, who, through my research, I would describe as a builder first and an executive second. Now, Rachel is Chief Product Officer at Webflow, where she's leading product design, pricing, data science, research, and growth to shape an AI-native digital experience platform for some of the world's absolutely best brands. Now, Rachel spent 3 years at Dropbox as VP and GM for the core and Gen AI business, and is accountable for $2.5 billion on the P&L, 800 million plus registered and 18 million plus paying users. Rachel's led a 550-person global team and shipped AI into search, automation, content organization, including Dropbox Dash. This, for me, is scale genuinely delivered. Now, before that, Rachel led product and design at LiveRamp, taking the portfolio from roughly 220 to 380 million and launching Safe Haven, a striking big channel deals across GCP and Snowflake. Commercial chops meets platform thinking is how I describe this. Now, earlier, Rachel was at TalkDesk and she grew from seed to product design with data, working with data teams across the US and Portugal, launched multi-million-dollar product lines and earned visionary recognition from Gartner's CCaaS Magic Quadrant. Rachel has founder stripes too, raising capital and shipping products as a CEO, and she backs the next wave as an angel investor as well. Rachel additionally mentors at Berkeley's Skydeck, and Rachel pairs technical fluency with design, intuition, and business rigor that is definitely needed. Today, she has owned a multi-product strategy, stacked the S-curves, and built organizations past the 1,000-employee mark, all while keeping a clear eye on those important, critical business outcomes. Rachel, I feel so privileged to have you on the show today, and I'm really excited to get into today's topic.
Thanks so much, Jay. I'm super excited to talk about this too.
Rachel, a hell of a career journey there. You've progressed through different industries. You've progressed through from small to big businesses and now Chief Product Officer at Webflow. The first question before we get into AI and product management is really what drives you as a product person in terms of your own personal first principles?
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually applies really well to the age of AI as well. But I think that the key thing that really drives me is trying to be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. And so that has always been something that I've really prized in terms of being able to, whether it's like learn a new industry, kind of translate that skill into talking to customers, learning a new technical skill, learning, about pricing and packaging. I think that I'm always trying to learn, and obviously in the age of AI, it's kind of like completely supercharged.
Rachel, we're going to be talking about building resilience into products. Before we get into that, could you set some context around what is Webflow? How is that current context shaping how you're considering resilience in your own product roadmaps and strategies?
Yeah, so Webflow is the AI native digital experience platform. It's where teams don't just publish pages, but they build experience for the web. And in the future, they're going to be building experiences for LLMs or wherever your brand lives. And so it's unlike other companies that have just kind of like bolted AI on. Webflow has built AI native experiences from the ground up for the answer engine era with native AEO or answer engine optimization agents that make your brand discoverable in AI answers, prompt to production, app generation, not just prototypes. And our bread and butter is a visual composable CMS and enterprise hosting platform that we've been building for over a decade. And this is all really safeguarded with what we call the brand OS, which creates brand consistency and trust in whatever channel you're in. And just like a little bit more about Webflow, we have over 300,000 customers that use Webflow today, including the New York Times, Dropbox, Monday.com, TED, Orange Theory Fitness, Verifone, huge companies that are really trying to get their brand out there and discovered by their customers and prospects.
It sounds a lot bigger than a two-pizza team over on the product side. So as Chief Product Officer, could you give me a little bit of an org chart? Like, what are you managing and dealing with on the human personnel front right now?
Yeah, I've got 100 people or so on my team. We've got several hundred people on the engineering side. And in terms of my org chart, I run product, design, data science, user research, analytics, pricing and packaging. So a lot of it just kind of like sits across the entire spectrum. And to me, this is like the perfect product portfolio. I think it's super fun to own this slice of the organization and get to work with these teams.
Nice. I appreciate that. I think your context there is going to be incredibly important for the rest of the the rest of the conversation here. So, Rachel, first up from me is, how should product teams evaluate where to integrate AI features? Is it the typical take it into discovery and work it out, make sure you put a problem at the front, or are you using different tactics and approaches that we may not have heard of before?
Yeah, so I think about maybe just taking a step back, it's good to think about even how AI is changing the way that we build. So, I think you kind of typically think about discovery and then design, and then you get into development, and there's probably some like sub steps in between. We're trying to break that we build AI native products. And one of the first things that you should really be thinking about is, what is your dream eval? And so an eval is basically a test case that your product should be able to, let's say, generate. And then, a lot of that is like, okay, what would have to be true to work backwards from that? What do you have to understand about the model? What would the model have to be able to do? And then a lot of what we're trying to do is actually get into production as quickly as possible. Because once you get into production, you see where your evals end up falling down. And it's more about trying to iterate the context that you're prompting the model with, trying to see how people are actually trying to prompt your product, and also trying to see where somebody accepts, like in our case, that we're generating apps, we're generating UI, and so do they accept what we've generated, or do they reject it and not actually use it? And so at the end of the day, you're still solving a problem. And I think of it as maybe even two different goals that you're trying to track towards. You're trying to track towards, how do you speed up the time to value? So I think about our time to value as 30 minutes or less, because a lot of the prompt to prototype products get you there very quickly. And then I think the other piece is, how do you speed up the time to outcome, that time to whatever the business outcome is that you're trying to drive. So in our case, we're trying to drive conversions from a prospect into a qualified lead or even a customer.
Fantastic. Rachel, I'm going to bring it back to this term resilience and building resilience into products, resilient products. If you've got a new product person, they're starting with you at Webflow, and the first question is, Rachel, what do you mean by building resilience and building resilient products? How would you put that to them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think one piece is really around, what does resilience mean to your customers, and kind of backing out from that. In our case, we have enormous enterprise customers where their website is on Webflow, and when it's down, they're not getting, anything from prospects, and they're not having their brand out in the wild. And so we have to kind of back out from that. Anything that reduces the quality of your hosted website, that is like where the bar is set. And so when we build roadmaps, we actually put a stack rank out there. And at the top of our stack rank, there are always 4 items. And I say it as like kind of 4 categories, and we start with that, and then we back away from that. So resiliency, obviously, like, what is the resiliency of our hosted experience? What is the resiliency of our builder experience? The second is availability. So ensuring that we hit the availability goals that we have set with our customers. Reliability. So is this a solution that goes down occasionally? Is this a solution that has performance issues, right? We're really focused there. And then security, of course. And so to me, that is where you start, ensuring that we meet those goals that we have. And then any feature that you build has to meet those goals. And so that is always the bar. And that quality bar is not something that we move, even with AI products.
Okay. I'm wondering if you can bring this to life for me.
Sure.
As a product manager, we've all got those features that we are emotionally attached to, even though we shouldn't be. What's an AI or just a feature of Webflow that you are really in love with?
Oh gosh, it's like asking which my babies is the most beautiful. I mean, I think I'll give a couple of examples that are newer products, but they're very different. But they're the things that our customers have loved the most. We just had our conference let's see, about 2 weeks ago, and it's really fun to actually get a lot of those new products into the wild. So one of the features that we launched is we're completely rebuilding our CMS, our content management system. And so we are bringing a brand new, like, enterprise grade scales to, a much, much greater capacity. And so I think scale is something that I always get really excited about, especially as we are building products for enterprise customers. And that was one of the products that probably got the most love, even though it's almost an invisible product. But we are bringing a completely next-gen CMS into the market very, very soon this year. So that was like exciting from a scale standpoint. Some of the other products that people got really excited about were really around how we bridge the experience across designers, developers, and marketers and make it feel very seamless. So we created a new product called Code Components that meant that developers for the first time could ship their repo into Webflow. We also made it so that you could vibe code directly in Webflow and vibe code components. We also have an app gen product that integrates with these as well. And so a lot of it, to me, when I think about kind of like what that quality bar is and what expectation we've set, it's around interoperability of our products, making it so that people don't have to think and be like, oh, this will just work for one of my counterparts across the organization out of the box. And so that's what really gets me excited.
Nice. We've touched on some of the highlights there of Webflow. Now I want to bring it back to how did you get there? So can you talk me through, what are some of the biggest design risks, challenges that you're facing when you're introducing AI as the CPO?
Totally. So I think the biggest design risk is it doesn't work, or it doesn't work in the way that someone expects it to. And so a big thing that we thought about was, how is it grounded in our existing product? How is it grounded in our platform? And I think that one of the biggest challenges for us is that we are that production grade platform. And so one of the bars that we set was that when you prompted, it had to be prompt to production, not prompt to prototype. And that's where we felt that generative AI would become genuinely useful for brands and would be trustworthy. And so how do we get there? Well, we kind of thought first principles. What does that mean in order to prompt to production, not just prompt to prototype? And what is that gap? And so a big part of that was, first, we had to ensure that your brand actually just showed up right out of the gates. And so we have the brand design system that is already part of your website, but that meant that we had to find the right way to share that context with the model and then actually get it to generate results that matched your brand. And so that was probably the hardest piece. Is, again, it's a little bit of taste. It's a little bit of, and then it's a little bit of saying, okay, what will this mean? Do the styles match? Like which set of styles? Because you might have thousands of styles, and that's a lot to actually share into a prompt. So what actually matters? So there is a lot of judgment call in terms of like what you're actually going to share with the model, and then a judgment call of, well, is this a good enough result? So I think that's like a good example where, AI can like generate code and it can even generate designs or a whole app instantly. But I think that we're in this like post-vibes era, and we've entered into that where I think it can't just be good enough for a demo. It has to be good enough that you can actually ship it into production. And then I think the companies that actually are going to win are going to do that without losing brand control and quality. So there are other parts of that we think about as well from an interoperability standpoint. How do we ensure roles and permissions are natively integrated in, right? Like this actually increases the size of your roadmap, but that's the gap in getting to production. And so, I think a lot of it is like, okay, what is your North Star? And for us, it's shipping AI generated apps into production. And then when you back off of that, what does that actually mean?
Nice. You touched on a few things there that I want to go into a little bit more. Firstly, the importance of brand and brand identity with regards to not only Webflow, but what Webflow is generating on behalf of your customers. You mentioned around quality of that. Who has the final say when AI is suggesting something that's conflicting with design rules and it's been identified? Who has the final say that has happened and it needs to be resolved?
It's a great question. So I think there's a couple of different ways to answer that. The first is like, as a product manager, is the thing that you are shipping getting accepted enough? And you have to decide if that acceptance is, what you expected. And if, and I would say you want it to be accepted 90% of the time. And so that's kind of like bar number one, as like the end user being, in our case, usually a designer or marketer that is in our app saying this product, this app that I'm generating is on brand or is off brand. Then I think knowing like what is the way that most tools don't give you the ability to actually edit. I think or you're just like reprompting and reprompting and reprompting. So that's part of what we tried to think through is like, well, what are the ways that we are going to allow people to get to that level of granularity? And, I think the other piece is like, who do you as a brand trust to kind of create experiences for your brand? And are you going to you might let like, a marketer prompt a app. You may not let them ship it to production. So again, I think a lot about roles and permissions in the case of a like an enterprise grade platform that's using AI. And the other thing I'll say is like this is going to get 10x more important as agents start building out all kinds of different experiences. And so, who is actually generating that experience? Is it an individual? Is it an agent on behalf of an individual? Do you trust that? Will there be a human in the loop? I think for a lot of brands, they want that human in the loop, but they're going to have to generate thousands of experiences. It's, if you look at what has kind of happened and you sort of future cast out, I think we're following a very similar pattern to what happened in social, where you started with the facebook.com. And it did not have a news feed even. And then the news feed got introduced and you started to like surface more information. And then all of a sudden ads got introduced into the news feed. And then fast forward to today, there's, hundreds of different types of branded experiences in social, if that's the channel that you choose to participate in. And I think social oftentimes is seen like as an add-on channel, but search is not. Search is like the definitive channel that every single brand participates in. And so I think the key is that brands are trying to figure out how do they have a team and a grounding in their brand that actually makes it so that you can kind of like ship something to production. But again, it all comes back to roles, permissions, approvals. Like how have you set up a system that ensures that your brand is being represented in the world correctly?
Nice. There's a piece that you spoke about there around the prompting, reprompting, etc. And the fact you're talking about a system, I've got to ask because Webflow is huge. When you're as big as Webflow, how do you hedge vendor risk without doubling your infrastructure bill, knowing that you've got vendors that you're dependent on? How do you manage that risk?
It's a great question. So one, we always have multiple vendors that we're using at any given time and can hot swap when there is, an outage, for example, in one of those vendors. In fact, one of those vendors had an outage the day before a keynote. So we were in the midst, you kind of have to build that resiliency. And I think this is a great question. The second piece is, and this is like a unique thing to model development, or right, a new model, you don't know when a new model is going to come out. Nobody knows. And when that new model comes out, you want to go and test what I call your 10-star evals. So what is the dream eval that you want to go and see how the new model performs? And so that's almost like a vendor risk question as well, because you want to be able to ship the new model into production as quickly as possible, but then you also want to go and check quality and sort of know how it's going to impact adoption of your product, because you get a baseline, and then you're trying to decide, well, what are examples where, like, I'll give one example around like image gen. So one of the only models in town for a while was GPT 4.0 for image gen, right? It was very good at kind of taking context, whether it was a photo or some text context, and then generating an image. It was really cool. It felt like a magic trick. And then Nano Banana came out, and all of a sudden it had like 10x better results, but not for everything. It had 10x better results for photos when you're trying to like swap out a background. But if you're trying to generate a character, for example, based on something, it was not as good. So a lot of that is, again, that's taste. And that is the product manager and the product designer getting in there and being like, okay, what is this actually good at? And so as soon as you get your hands on a new model, I think one of the things you have to do is figure out like, what is the right way to prompt that model, which is going to be different than the way you prompted other models. And then go back and take your evals and try to run them through and like play with it. So there's a lot of aspect of like experimentation that happens, but you don't necessarily, what's interesting is you don't necessarily have to change your front end. So the user experience may remain the same, but you're deciding, you might have to change when you show a model and when you don't show a model.
Right. Rachel, another part of resilience for me, and it's not as sexy as prompting and the tech part of what we plug into the pipes, is data privacy and governance, and all of that is all about integrity. Can I ask, what is your policy on training data, retention, and audit? And as a leader, how do you ensure that your teams are adhering to these policies so you've got that resilience around this quite, to be honest, dry topic?
I think it's a fun topic because it's also another one of those surface areas that is changing on practically a weekly basis, country by country. And so you have to really be thinking, again, it starts from a first principle. So in our case, we do not train on our customer data. That, like, full stop. We don't train on our partner data. And, if we were to change that in the future, we'd be very, very, very explicit about it. But we also have the benefit of having a lot of public data out in the world, because there are websites that are out there. And again, we're really trying to think through, how do we ensure that, number one, we are going to drive adoption of enterprise grade products. And part of that means that we're very, very thoughtful and careful about what we do with customer data. And so that is just a first principle that we start with. We obviously have security, privacy, legal teams that review all of our products at the point when you have a spec. We have built out custom GPTs for product managers to run their products through for each of those, just so you can get like early flags. We, obviously have lots of different checkpoints throughout the product development lifecycle to ensure that what we put out there is still adhering to that set of policies. And so that's really key to me in terms of building enterprise grade AI products, which may be different than if you're just building a consumer product.
The next question on resilience is pricing resilience. And I know we could do a whole event around just this, but can I ask, strategically at a high level, Rachel, what has been your play for bundling AI so that it lands simple but expands naturally to increase your contract value?
Yeah, so To date, we've had a couple of different ways we've thought about AI. In general, we've thought about it as like, how much value does that customer get? How much of that is unique ascribed to us and the product that we've built? And if it's not unique and we're just improving a workflow, for example, it's just gonna be part of the core product. And so I'll give like a couple of examples. The first is really like we introduced a bunch of new AI native products at our last conference. And so, for example, one of them is like copy gen, and it's inline copy gen when you're building and when you're creating an article, for example. We do not charge for that. We charge for that. It's just part of the platform. And we felt like that was really more of a convenience to not have to like copy something over from ChatGPT or some other vendor. And we felt like that is just part of the cost of goods sold. Another example of that is our optimized product, our AI optimized product that has a very, very unique workflow, a very, very unique outcome generated orientation where we help you drastically improve your conversion rate optimization. That is an add-on product that has its own pricing and packaging. And then as we start to think about what is the new, what I think what we're trying to think about is like, how do we simplify if it is going to be like a new AI product that ends up costing us a lot? So I think a lot of this is like trying to understand, to your point earlier, what is our cost of a product? And then also, what is the value that that a customer is getting out of the product? Is it a 10x value? And so that's kind of the bar that I set for charging for an AI product. It has to be 10x better than the experience that you previously had in order to charge for it.
Nice. Staying in that world of value, what can you talk me through with regards to where AI has triggered shifts for product workflows or team structures in Webflow or in one of your clients or customers' lives?
Yeah, I think that prompt to production or prompt to prototype is probably one of the easiest ones that maybe a lot of product managers have gotten used to. So especially product managers, like we build prototypes, practically every day for something new. It's part of the sales process in a lot of ways of like trying to get something greenlit. And it used to happen in your design toolkit. It might have happened in wireframes in the past. But now you're at a point where you can literally just, like describe the product and generate that, idea in like a minute or two. And so I think that is a place where the time to value in the build has gotten to be substantially smaller, just to the prototype, to be like, is this possible? Does this feel good? What would we have to go and explore from like a technical spike to actually get this to production? And so I think that was like the first wave of collapsing the build time. And I think a lot of companies have figured out how to harness, like driving value as well as capturing value off of that set of workflows. I think the next set of workflows that we're really focused on is prompt to production, which is the last mile. It's the 20% of things that are really hard to, it ends up being one people. And so the more that we can figure out ways so that you don't always have to pull in a person to do every single thing. I do think there's value for people, by the way. This is not like saying there's not going to be developers in the world. Like I am very convinced that this is just going to be an explosion of software and experiences rather than, I think it just really augments what you can actually do. And so the way that I think about capturing value on the back end is like that last 20% of the, again, this is like kind of the post vibes workflows that takes companies, I don't know, weeks, months to actually do. And so which of those are the most painful to stand up? Which of those can you actually start to carve out that is like a unique workflow that makes it just feel very, very easy to integrate? And so that's where I think there's like a lot of opportunity to capture value as well.
Well, as a product leader, that's certainly exciting for me. I completely agree. The last mile, without doubt, the hardest. But you mentioned around human impact, the retention of humans and the importance of that. And I know design and design leadership has been a significant part of your career as well. My last question for you here, with that in mind, Rachel, is how do you balance all of that AI automation in that last mile, but with the need for human creativity and insight?
Yeah, I mean, I think design happens in so many different ways. So it happens, again, I kind of keep going back to the evals, but like our designers are in our eval tool. And they're also looking at, what actually is possible to generate from the new models. And I think a lot of that is, again, taste of, does this meet our bar of being, 10x better or 90% of what you would expect? I think design also still happens in delight. And then design happens in explaining what the model is doing versus what the human is doing. Thinking about, where do you want human in the loop? Where do you not need human in the loop? Start giving us like levers to go and test. And then at the end of the day, I think design is really about how a customer feels. And so being able to still create products where the customer feels in control, the customer feels like like you trust the product that you're using. The customer feels, you know, any number of emotions that you're striving for. But I think those emotional goals are as important, if not ever, in the age of AI.
Your final points there. Sorry, just one more question for me
Yeah.
here, Rachel, because you're talking there about differentiators. And so a question for you is, when you look ahead to the next 12, 24 months, what moat matters the most in this AI era for products like Webflow, do you believe? You spoke earlier about that time to delivery, that the developer velocity. We've got data, we've got distribution. What is the moat for you going forward?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that this is not just a moat for us, but this is a moat that every single product manager should be thinking about. And there's an adage that like first time founders focus on product and second time founders focus on distribution. I would say the same is true for product managers. Early stage PMs focus on like product features. Later stage PMs focus on how people will discover your product and what time to value looks like. And so I think the big new lever to focus on is answer engine optimization. And so we are obviously very focused on that. This is this new distribution lever, and every technologist needs to understand it. So just like a quick setup of what is AEO. I think we've just like exited the 10 blue links era of Google. And I think the world of SEO was people typed 3 to 4 keywords into Google, and then AEO is where you basically get an answer, a direct answer back, a 23-word conversational query on average. And so that changes the distribution. And instead of users just visiting your site from that top of funnel, that first interaction with your product is going to be through an AI summarized answer. And so there's maybe like 3 things that I would encourage every product manager to think about in this new era, because we're going from maybe 1 to 10% of your traffic coming from AEO, and I would bet you're at 50% by the end of next year. And so that's the wild change. And so there's maybe a couple of things. I think a lot of PMs probably think about like the Amazon PR FAQ, for example. I want all PMs to think about, what is your AEO FAQ? And so if SEO was about ranking and you're kind of like, that's marketing's job, a PM should ask at the beginning of a product, what are my top 20 questions that a prospect or user is going to ask before, during, or after using my product? And then partner with product marketing and support to systematically publish clusters of answers, not just like a one-off blog post, but make your product discoverable early in the journey, not just at the point of purchase. So that's kind of like one actionable piece here, because I think this is really what it means to be distribution first, like take on that mindset. I think the second piece is structuring your product for machines and not just humans. And so, LLMs need like structured, machine readable context to pull your product into answers. And so that might, like in our case, we released a schema.org markup product. And that's really about having like clean semantic HTML and using standards like LLMs.txt. And so for a PM, I think, or even product design, it's ensuring your docs, your knowledge base, your APIs, your onboarding guides are structured so that answer engines can parse them. And then I think the third piece is really around building authority where AI it looks. And that changes, by the way. That's not something that, it could be Reddit today or Quora today. It could be YouTube tomorrow. It could be your own content. And so I think as a PM, you have to think multi-channel trust building. Where would AI learn about your product, and where do you want the authoritative answer to be? And so I think that the key shift is really thinking about not just the right features, but engineering discoverability.
I'm so glad I asked that question on top of the design one. Wow, what a amazing set of insights to wrap up the episode with. I really appreciate the share there, Rachel.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for all the great questions. It was really fun.
Absolute pleasure. I thank you for bringing not only your strategic perspective, but real world product management, day-to-day things to think about into the conversation here as well. So a big thank you for your time today.
Likewise.
Thank you all to the audience as well. I hope you've enjoyed this episode with myself and Rachel. If you'd like to learn more about Product Coalition, head over to productcoalition.com. Until next time, thank you very much.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansel. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.